This is the Building Automation Monthly podcast with Phil Zito, episode 122. Hey folks, Phil Zito here. I'm the president and CEO of Building Automation Monthly, where we bring the best online building automation training to help BAS professionals move forward in their careers and execute their daily jobs more efficiently and more effectively. So over the past 3 episodes, we've been going through a 4-part series, and if you haven't guessed it, this is part 4 of that series on IT networks. You see, there's been a lot of changes in the BAS industry lately, but the most noticeable change has been the adoption of IP controls throughout buildings and really utilizing a lot of network technologies and compute technologies that are very dependent on IT networks. Now, what does all that gobbledygook mean? What it means is that we have gone as an industry, taken things like virtual servers, cloud hosting, virtual private networks, IP controls, and the list goes on. And where those things used to be kind of fringe things dedicated just to really large enterprise customers, now we have moved to just the common commercial office building using these more, I wouldn't even call them advanced technologies because they're really not advanced, but they're advanced for the maturity level of our industry. And what I mean by that is, let's be honest, when we talk about the building automation industry, we're pretty immature when it comes to our knowledge of IT. And that's why this series has been one of our most popular series as far as the amount of listens we've gotten in the podcast. And in this episode, we are going to be wrapping up this series. So up to this point, we've talked through the physical data link and network layers of network communication. We talked about all the different physical devices. We talked about how those connect on a local subnet. And then we talked about how those work on multiple subnets, things like routes, IP addresses, etc., etc. And now we're moving to what's called the transport layer. Now, at this point, some of you may be starting to tune out. And I feel like I'm saying that a lot because we've gone a little bit deep in these episodes. But the point of these episodes, and really want to level set kind of expectations here, it's not to go and teach you to be a network engineer. Quite honestly, and this is coming from my own personal experience, having designed networks for hospitals, having designed wireless networks, having designed integration plans for massive buildings, I will tell you firsthand, the average BAS professional, even the above average BAS professional, does not need to have that level of depth and skill. It's just not something that is required. What you really have to understand, and this is for BAS professionals, both technicians, salespeople, design engineers, etc., is that you need to have an understanding of what all this terminology means, how this terminology works, and kind of how everything kind of pieces together. I'm going to apologize beforehand because I'm recording this during the summer years for summertime for those of you who are listening to it right now. And I just got a new dog, and you might hear that new dog. But we'll apologize for that ahead of time. Anyways, with all that being said, let's dive into the transport layer. So what is the transport layer? Why does it matter to you as a BAS professional? Well, back when I was doing a major retrofit for a university, and I think this university, if I remember correctly, had about 100 buildings. We were having these issues, and this was when I was fairly early on in my career. I actually came into the industry with very little IT knowledge. And it's been through a lot of self-study that I've got my Cisco and Microsoft certifications, IT master's degrees, and ended up going and managing the technical integration program for Johnson Controls prior to starting Building Automation Monthly and now running that training business. So I want you to know that when I talk about things IT, it may feel overwhelming to you, and you may be like, oh, well, that guy has all this IT knowledge. I was probably worse off than most of you listening as far as my baseline IT skills. And it's about to be illustrated in the story. So I was trying to get this BAS server to connect to some BAS supervisory devices. And I was getting really frustrated. I had the IP addresses set right, and I could ping the different devices. Everything was fine. And yet the devices could not communicate to one another. And I was getting really frustrated. I was like yelling at the IT people. You did something wrong, because they're going back and forth. They're like, we set everything up. And I had to eat a big can of humbleness because it was completely ignorance on my part. And what it was that the port 47808, the BACnet speaks, was closed. And if you've been in this field for any amount of time, you've probably been there too, where there's a firewall that is blocking a port and not allowing your data traffic through. And that is what the transport layer addresses. So if we think about it, right, we've got the physical layer, and the physical layer handles the electrical signals going across the wire. Then we've got the data link layer, and that's the actual data links between the switch and the hosts. And then we've got the network layer, and that handles all of our network level communication. But in between two hosts across a network or on a single network, you have what are called logical links. Remember early on in, I believe it was, episode 119, I think. Maybe it was episode 118. We talked about how you have physical links. You have access links, you have trunk links, and these are physical links connecting hosts to a network device or to network devices. Well, you also have these things called logical links. And logical links are connections between two services. So if we think about BACnet, we think of BACnet being UDP port 47808. And don't worry if you don't know what UDP is and you're still not 100% on port, because you're thinking, but Phil, you said ports are these physical things I plug RJ45 cables or RJ45 heads from Ethernet cables into. And now you're saying they're logical. What's going on? Don't worry, we'll get there. But if you think about a BACnet as a service, because it is a service. I mean, if you go back to our 3-part series on BACnet where we talked about services and we talked about, how you've got client and server devices and those go and issue services and services have responses, et cetera, et cetera. Well, if you think about that, a service is identified within a computer by its logical port number. So if you were to go into command prompt right now and type in the command netstat, so NET, so November Echo Tango, Sierra Tango, Alpha Tango, so netstat. Yes, I was in the military, so I got my, whatever that's called, phonetic counting or whatever. I don't even remember what the official term is for it, but whatever. However, you go in to command prompt, you type in netstat, you'll be able to see all the ports that are open. You'll also see ports that are TCP versus ports that are UDP. Now, a port is a representation of an application or service that is running on a computing device. This is important for you to understand because when you go to IT, here you're going to ask for a couple things, right? Typically. You're going to say, hey, I need my IP addresses for these devices and I need these ports open. And they're going to say, why do you need these ports open? And you're going to say, I need these ports open because I'm running these services. And then IT is going to go, BACnet? I've never heard of BACnet. What is BACnet? And then you're going to be like, well, it's a protocol. And then they're going to say, yeah, okay, well, what kind of protocol is it? And you're going to be, it's a BAS protocol. And then they're going to go, well, what's a BAS? And you're going to go, it's a building automation system. And instantly, when you're in that kind of conversation, you've already lost the conversation. I was about to curse there. Stuff's going to go downhill really fast when you're in that kind of conversation. Ideally, what you want to have happen is, yeah, I need port 47808 UDP open. We've got a building automation protocol. And building automation is essentially smart homes, but for buildings. And I know that you may be worried about the security, and you may be worried about being unfamiliar with this protocol. And because of that, I've got XYZ document, and you can read up on the protocol, and you can actually send them to the Wireshark definition of BACnet, and it'll describe what the protocol is, how the protocol works, why the protocol does, and you can go and explain that information to them. Now, back on topic. That was kind of a little segue here. So I got the IT person to go and help me open up the firewall so that 47808 wasn't blocked. We had network communication, and everything was well. Now, as I mentioned, ports and the transport layer are logical links. They are two connections, or they are a connection, rather, between typically two hosts. They don't have to be hosts. You can actually have a logical link between a host and a network device. But typically, you have a logical link between two hosts, and they communicate two ways: reliably and unreliably. Now, when folks hear reliably and unreliably, they have this natural tendency to think that reliable communication is actually better than unreliable. And that's not necessarily the case. So reliable communication, all that means is that you're ensuring the message got sent and received by using this kind of sequence acknowledge. What happens is you go and you initiate a connection to another host on that logical port. And then as you start to send traffic, if that traffic is received, the other host sends an acknowledge back. If that host doesn't send an acknowledge, then you resend the traffic. This actually has a lot of data overhead, and that's why you don't see it used in BACnet. You see UDP used because of the amount of data overhead. That's why we primarily, in a lot of BAS protocols, besides for Modbus, we see UDP being used. Now, UDP is an unreliable protocol, meaning that what it does is it sends the message and that's it. There is no verification that the message was received. Now, you may think that's a bad thing. You may think, oh my gosh, that's a horrible thing. How I send my BACnet command and then I don't get anything back. That's horrible. Well, yes and no. You see, BACnet has services that have acknowledgements built into them. So even though you are not creating a connection, you are sending a write property, and it's expecting a simple acknowledgement back saying, hey, I executed this write property. And if it doesn't get that, then it will error out or send the message again, depending on what service you're running. That is very different than a reliable protocol. You see, a reliable protocol is going to go and have this connection, and it's looking at every data packet being sent. Whereas with BACnet, an unreliable communication, that communication is being sent, and then it is the device itself is waiting for a acknowledgement if it's a confirmed service. Okay? You completely confused? Don't worry. If confirmed services, unconfirmed services are confusing you, simply go listen to our episodes on BACnet, which I'll link to on the show notes page of the protocol. This is, if you haven't picked up on it, a very complex topic. It feels to me personally like I'm bouncing all over the place on this podcast episode, because that's just kind of how things are when you get to more logical concepts. When you're in the physical layer, it's you got a wire with a bit of 0 or 1, a digital signal of 0 or 1, meaning on or off, and that's it. But then when you get into things like the logical layer, not the physical layer anymore, things are just a little more fluid. So as I mentioned, we have that unreliable and reliable communication, and that's how hosts communicate, and they do it across ports. Now, as I mentioned, reliable communication, it is known as the Transmission Communication Protocol, or TCP, and then you have the User Datagram Protocol, or UDP. UDP is unreliable, TCP is reliable. Now, with all that being said, with your brain being filled with the wonders of logical link connections and reliability and unreliability, and you're probably just sitting there feeling a little mushy right now, let's give us some concrete BAS examples. All right, so you've got a BAS server, a BACnet server, and it is set to accept BACnet traffic from port 47808. And that BACnet server is on a local subnet. You've got a BAS supervisory device on the same subnet. Then physically, they are connected via access links to the switch. See, we're bringing all these episodes home. And what's going on is that BAS supervisory device wants to send some data to the server because the server has requested a read property from the supervisory device. And so the BAS supervisory device is going to respond. But what happens is the BAS server initiates that read property. That read property is sent via IP from one device to another using a unicast message. Now the link, the UDP link, and I hesitate to even call it a link because it's not really a link. There's no dedicated connection. It's a fire and forget. So that UDP message is sent to the supervisory device. The supervisory device is utilizing an application protocol data unit, which is specific to BACnet, an APDU, and you have your APDU timeouts. So if that APDU is not processed and responded to by that supervisory device within a certain amount of time, then it's going to indicate an issue, and that device or point is going to signify as offline, most likely. So what's going on behind the scenes with all of this is you've got your physical connections to the switch via access links. You've got your data link traffic. You've got your IP traffic. You've got your ports, your data traffic going across port 47808 UDP. And then you've got your higher level protocol things like your NPDUs and APDUs, which are independent of IT networks. Those are BACnet concepts. And if you're like, man, what do those things mean? Don't worry, we spent an entire 3 episodes before this series going through BACnet. Just go back and listen to those and it'll make complete sense. But that is one example of how BAS data functions. That's one way we do it. Another way we do it is with all these web user interfaces nowadays, you've got a BAS server and you connect to it via port 80, which is HTTP, the hypertext transfer hypertext transport or transfer protocol. I could Google that and give you the correct acronym, but that's just, you don't have to memorize that. But port 80 is for HTTP unsecure, and then port 443 is for HTTP secure. And what happens is you'll normally send a message via your web browser like Google Chrome using port 80 to the BAS server. The BAS server then will send you back most likely a HTTPS redirect, and you'll have to authenticate. And that will create a session between you and the server using TCP and also using encryption and asynchronous encryption, stuff like that, which we're not going to get into. Don't worry, that's a much deeper rabbit hole. And once all that happens, now you're communicating between you and the server. And you may be like, Phil, why do I need to know that? Why do I need to know about port 80, port 443, all that jazz? Once again, if you're having issues with your BAS server, or if you're trying to explain to an IT person about this BAS user interface that you want to expose on their network and they perceive it as a security risk, if you can explain how all this functions, then you're going to be in a much better spot. And that's why I'm a firm believer that salespeople need to understand this terminology. In my experience, having worked on several $100 million worth of opportunities while at Johnson Controls and at Allerton and a couple other places, I will tell you that I've just seen an increase in the influence of IT on decision making, as well as just the requirements for secure system installation, or at least being able to explain how a system installation is secure. So understanding this terminology is going to take you very far in being successful with working with IT groups. This was a slightly shorter episode. I don't want to just stretch it out for the sake of stretching it out. The transport layer is really very simple. I mean, all you really need to understand is that the big thing here is ports. Having your ports open, understanding the address of your ports so that way you're sending your data traffic to the right ports, and those ports are open to receive that data traffic. If you've got those three, I think that's three things, maybe two things down, then you'll be rock solid. If you don't, then no matter how good the three layers are, the physical, the network, or the physical, the data link, and the network, your stuff's not going to communicate. All right, so with that being said, thanks so much for listening to this episode. Everything I've talked through, these previous episodes I'm referring to both on network as well as BACnet, can be found at buildingautomationmonthly.com/122. Once again, that's buildingautomationmonthly.com/122. Really encourage you to visit our site. We have 3 great free mini courses that you can attend on BAS fundamentals, programming, as well as IT. So those are completely free video courses that will give you a primer on starting your knowledge journey of BAS. Plus, you've got an archive now of 122 plus podcast episodes, depending on when you're listening to this. Now, I've had some of you reach out to me asking what's going on with BAM TV or live YouTube show. For the moment, that is on hold just due to what we've got going on within the business. We have a lot of commitments that we need to hit right now. And those commitments are going to deliver an amazing product for our customers, as well as for those of you who are attending our free courses. So really have to focus in on that. But come fall, mid-fall, we should be starting that back up and getting that series going again. It's just that takes several hours to put together over the week for our team, and it's just stuff we don't have bandwidth for right now. With that being said, thank you so much for listening to this podcast episode. I know this was a little bit all over the place, so by all means, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section, ask for clarifications, if I could speak correctly, and go to buildingautomationmonthly.com/122 and access the show notes as well as any links. Thanks a ton. I'll talk to you again next week. Take care.